Shalom. First, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, from whom I learned this truth. Shalom to the 144,000 elect. I am Mayakala. And I'm not sure what the name of this one's going to be, but I was listening to Redacted yesterday, and what's today's date being I believe today is the 28th. Yeah, so that would have been the January 27th show that I was listening to. And they were talking, they had an part where they spoke about weather. They was talking about Iran and talking about how the weather is being manipulated. So I want to bring out a little bit of that. And it's about 20 minutes long, but I'm not going to play all of it. I'm just going to play just the audio. And then I have a few verses that I wanted to bring out, because this current storm that we're in, this current winter storm that we're in right now, is looking like it is a result of weather manipulation. All right? Because you're having places in the south that are experiencing weather that they haven't experienced before. You know, there's a lot of ice being brought in, and a lot of people, as a result of that ice that's in, that is are being they're without power. All right, so this is not something that is a normal occurrence in the South. I mean, I know it has happened before where they've experienced ice, but they're experiencing temperatures that they haven't experienced before. So I asked ChatGPT, who said he who controls the weather controls the world, and why did he make this statement? And it says, the phrase, he who controls the weather controls the world, is widely attributed to Lyndon B. Johnson, who was Vice President of the United States in the early 1960s. Said he used this line in a 1962 speech at Southwest Texas State University while talking about the potential of future weather control technologies and weather satellites. Now you have to keep in mind that during the Vietnam War, cloud seeding was taking place, so they were manipulating the weather. And even though this response from ChatGPT is alluding to that nobody can control the weather around the world, they may be able to control it in certain areas. Well, that's just showing you that they can, and at this time in the 1960s, they were able to manipulate the weather, because they made it rain out of monsoon season in Vietnam in an effort to destroy the roads, so that the Vietnamese who they were at combat with would not be able to bring out and move their weapons about as they needed to. So they made it rain longer, because they noticed that the Vietnamese were able to gain a lot of ground and to do a lot of damage when the monsoon season was over. So as a result of that, they wanted to try to make it so that they can control the weather and make it rain and prolong the monsoon season in an effort to defeat the Vietnamese. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of this. It says who said it? So Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson said He who controls the weather controls the world, on May 27, 1962, in a commencement address. It says the exact wording may have been part of a broader comment about the future technological capabilities, specifically the idea that weather satellites and weather modification might someday allow humanity to influence weather systems on a large scale. They're saying someday as if at this point in time they weren't didn't have the capabilities, when in all actuality they did have the capabilities because they were doing it. It says, why did he say it? It said Johnson's comment came at a time when weather modification and cloud seeding were serious subjects of research and discussion within the scientific and policy communities. It says the U.S. government had formed committees to explore whether intentional weather modification was feasible or wise. Since there was intense geopolitical competition with the Soviet Union, the Cold War context, and speculation about future technologies was common. His statement was philosophical and speculative rather than practical announcement of weather engineering capability. He was expressing a belief shared at the time among some policymakers and scientists that advances in weather prediction and potentially weather modification could have enormous strategic impact if they ever became truly effective. All right, and this is just an example of how this man, and when I say this man, I'm talking about Esau, or the so-called white man. This man Esau Edom he's just well, first of all, he's a weapon of the Lord. The Lord allows this man to do the things that he does, but this man has taken it out of hand because he actually believes that he is in control of his doings and that he is the one who is actually making up these instruments, and that he's actually in control of his own actions. I just wanted to go. I'm going to bring a verse out, just based upon what I just read about how they just were thinking up ways in which they could modify the weather in an effort to be able to control the world. And I'm going to go over to Psalms chapter 36 and verse 4. It says, he deviseth mischief upon his bed, he setteth himself in a way that is not good, he abhorreth not evil. So just the simple fact that he would even do or even sit up and think about a way that he can control and manipulate the weather in order for him to be able to manipulate people and to bring about the desired result of what people do in this world because of his evil thoughts. He wants to be able to control people, and through controlling and manipulating the weather, he thinks that he's able to do just that because he wants to be like the Most High. He wants to be like Yahweh. All right, because he's done so many things, so many wicked things in this world, and he's sitting in such a position of authority right now in this world, not realizing that the world has been given to the wicked, as it says in Job 9:24. All right, and I'm gonna read just the rest of this. This is on ChatGPT because, like I said, I have a short video that I'm gonna play just the audio of, just to hear some of the things that he's doing even right now to manipulate this weather and to manipulate this current storm that we're in. It says, under the important context, it says, no nation can control the weather on a global scale. So you notice that they say on a global scale because they can control this weather. And just the simple fact that they are in different lands and go to different places and have different devices in different lands, they're able to control and manipulate the weather to places that they are. It says modern science can influence very limited local weather phenomena. Example, cloud seeding in some conditions, but this is not anywhere near controlling weather worldwide. So just the simple fact that he's admitting right here that modern science can influence very limited local weather phenomena. As a result of him being able to do that in local areas, you see what he's doing right now. You see what he's doing in the South. It says the quote has since been used in many conspiracy theories about geoengineering and weather manipulation. But Johnson's original remark was aspirational and rooted in mid-20th century optimism about technological process, not evidence of actual weather control powers. All right? So they're just throwing that in there just to try to clean up exactly what he said, because he probably said a little more than they wanted him to say, because this is what they're actually doing. They're manipulating the weather. And even at that time, they were able to manipulate. They were doing experiments to find out if they could manipulate the weather. All right. And this video that I'm going to play, just the audios for it's comes from Redacted. The date that they put this out was January the 27th, and I am going to play this under the fair use. This is for educational purposes only. This is not a monetized channel. All right. This is under the copyright laws of 1976. Just for edification purposes only. All right. And it is about 20 minutes long, but like I said, I'm not going to play all of it. I'm going to cut it short. And then I have just a couple verses that I want to bring out, and that'll be the end. All right. So I pray that you'll be able to hear this.
Million Americans are still without power, if you can believe that, after that brutal winter storm brought massive snow and ice to much of the United States. Was the government or NGOs involved in some sort of a massive cloud seeding chemical geoengineering operation prior to this weekend's storm? Well, look at eyewitness reports all over the country. It doesn't take much to actually find them, reporting the same thing, all reporting the same thing. In the morning, the skies had a few of these lines in the sky, mostly clear, but then a few started to appear. Then by 10 a.m., more and more started to appear all across the skies. Then by 1 p.m., more and more, look at that, more and more start appearing above the skies. And then 3 p.m., again, more.
And Salakia, what he's showing right now is how they manipulate the skies by the things that they're spraying with the use of airplanes, all right, with that look like clouds in the sky. But he's showing the difference in the hours of the day. As the hours of the day go on, it started out a completely clear day, and just in a number of hours, it was completely cloudy. All right. So Salakia, I just wanted to tell you what he was showing.
These lines in the skies, and then of course we saw what happened. A massive, really devastating storm. We still don't know the effects or how much of this, the fallout. We have the power outages. What will be the total death count? What is the operation here? Dane Wigington is the leader over at geoengineeringwatch.org, and he has been looking at this storm and all of the pieces of this that have gone into making this storm happen over the past few days, and one of our favorite guests to have back here on the show. Dane, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
Thanks, Clayton. Thanks, Natalie. And first, to answer the question, is this storm engineered? Yes, absolutely, 100% top to bottom. I'll get to that, but if I can back up that formerly incredibly important conversation you just had with Colonel Davis, and Natalie, I could not agree with you more on your assessment, your anger at the situation. And Iran, whatever we think of their culture or their government, they have not invaded another country for 250 years. And so again, the amount of deception going on is mind-numbing. And let me weave that into climate engineering. We know Iran has been the victim of climate engineering weather warfare for at least 4 decades. They have completely cut off the flow of precipitation to Iran, so much so that the capital of Iran, with a population of 10 million, they're now considering evacuating 10 million people to where? Because they literally have no water.
All right, so you see he's saying for the past 40 years, they've been manipulating the weather in Iran. All right. So they've been able to suppress the rain. So I'll let us continue.
Because the NATO operations, and Iran is specifically named NATO and Israel as cutting off their precipitation for 40 years. That's weather warfare. I wonder why they don't like us over there. And again, they've been on the floor of the UN, on film, on the record, stating emphatically, the president of that country, that NATO's cutting off their precipitation. How is that not an ongoing act of war for 40 years?
I didn't know that.
Right. Actually, can you talk more about that, Dane?
Absolutely. On the floor of the UN, Ahmadinejad from Iran, going back a decade plus, emphatically stating that NATO and Israel were cutting off the flow of precipitation to Iran. And let's plug this in, going all the way back 64 years to President Lyndon Johnson in 1962. This is the beginning 30 seconds of every weekly geoengineeringwatch.org update on our site, all news. First 30 seconds is film footage, Lyndon Johnson stating on film, on the record, that we had the power to control the world's cloud layer then, and he who controls the weather controls the world. Why? Because he who controls the weather can control the flow of precipitation in any country, anywhere, how toxic that rain is, how much rain falls or doesn't. Thus, they can destabilize food supplies. Thus, they can destabilize populations. 40 years, the Iranian climate science meteorological community has stated that NATO is cutting off their precipitation. They're not guessing. They have incredibly sophisticated weather monitoring facilities, just like we have. There's no speculation here. They're cutting off precipitation.
What are the mechanics of that, Dean?
Yeah, that's a good question. How does that work?
Before we get to the U.S. piece of this and the storm, I want to continue on this line of thought. But what are the mechanics of us just cutting it off? I know what Lyndon Johnson said, of course, in Vietnam, and how we used
cloud seeding
to actually flood the troops. But how do we cut it off?
Climate intervention, aka weather warfare operations, are far more effective at eliminating and dispersing precipitation than augmenting it.
Wow.
They've done the same thing to the U.S. West Coast. Going back over a decade, my presentations, Engineered Drought Catastrophe Target California. We can speculate on the agendas and objectives, and there are many, all of them nefarious. They're doing the same thing here, but the mechanisms by which they can completely cut off precipitation by the manipulation of atmospheric pressure zones, high pressure domes, which are exactly what ionosphere heater facilities like HAARP create. HAARP is a weapon of mass destruction. It's one of about 100 ionosphere heaters around the globe. These facilities, and this is not speculation either, this is science, study, confirmed fact. They, in the case of HAARP, can transmit 3.6 million watts of power to the ionosphere, electrically charged ionosphere. That's a frequency transmission. That causes an electrical chain reaction, superheats that part of the atmosphere, expanding it up and down. The downward push forms a high pressure dome. Nothing can enter that. No moisture can enter that. It spins around it in the northern hemisphere. That creates a clockwise spin. So what we have happening right now, I'll weave all this together. The high pressure dome in the west is spinning all the moisture clockwise up and over the western U.S. They're chemically nucleating it the whole way, spins it back down into the eastern U.S. They combine that with the flow of moisture from the record warm Gulf of Mexico. Since when do winter storms come from the record warm Gulf of Mexico? And they combine those two, and in the transition zone you have now thunder snow, you have ice storms everywhere because this chemically nucleated material hits the ground before it sets up. These are patented processes, by the way. So back to Natalie's question, how do they cut off precipitation? That high pressure dome, when you're manipulating atmospheric pressure zones, you can cut off moisture from ever even entering a part of the world. Second method, if they overseed with condensation nuclei that's too small, particles that are too small to allow the raindrops to combine and form, what you get is these featureless skies that looks like it should rain, but nothing falls out. Again, those are two methods with which they can completely cut off precipitation to an area for as long as they want. These are patented processes. They've done it to Iran for decades. They're doing it to the U.S. So you end up with these drought deluge scenarios. And the crown jewel weapon for the controllers, Natalie and Clayton, is that they can blame all of this on nature.
Well, don't you hate when people say, "I told you so"? Yeah, that's me, actually, because I did tell you. Sorry, but I told you that gold and silver were going to reap the benefits of excessive money printing, the Fed just printing money like crazy.
Salaki, I'm gonna try to skip past that.
Multiple whistleblowers from that have worked on these HARP arrays and confirmed everything that you just talked about. And not all, one of them, that I talked about was up in Alaska, one of the HARP centers in Alaska, which
that's the one that's actually called HARP, HAARP is the acronym, and that's the one people most recognize. It's the biggest facility like it in the world, but there's about 100 similar facilities, different designs, and we also have the NexRad network. That's a frequency transmission network in the continental U.S. that's used to manipulate storms like the Texas flood last July that held that storm in place, caused it to precipitate out in one location. Hurricane Harvey, that's how they know Hurricane Harvey was going to go where it went 7 days in advance, and they knew 7 days in advance it was going to sit there and spin and drop 50 inches of rain, because those frequency transmissions, which are of a different variety than the ionosphere heaters, they have the ability, by a repelling effect on the air mass that's saturated with electrically conductive particulates, to hold that air mass in place if they surround it with these transmissions. So again, from every conceivable level, these storms are being manipulated. And what's happening right now in the continental US, and although there are many agendas and objectives with the chemical winter weather warfare, which is taking place, that's exactly what it is. Don't eat the snow. I don't say that in jest. But what did we see from Mr. Trump about this weather? He said, quote, "Where's your global warming now?" So we know the agenda is to drill baby drill and burn baby burn and take over countries that have oil, like Venezuela. So they need cover.
Here's how I fixed my marionette lines fast.
This is my face at 72. No makeup, no filter, just one aloe.
That they need the American population to think that's not a problem.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and cut it right there. But if you want to hear the rest of that, you can just watch that on Redacted. That was the January 27th episode of it. All right, because this man, Esau Edom, thinks that he is like the Most High. He thinks that he has the right to be able to bring these things about by manipulating the weather and polluting the atmosphere. All right. I'm going to go to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 13. And it says, "For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, and I will exalt my throne above the stars of the Most High. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north." Verse 14 says, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." So this man is comparing himself, and he actually thinks that through his technology and the use of his weapons, and in this case is weather manipulation records. You heard them talk about NexRad and the HARP program. These programs that they've worked on in an effort to manipulate the weather. And you can see just from what the man mentioned here on the Redacted episode, that these past few incidences that occurred in the South, the flooding incident in Texas and the hurricane that hit North Carolina and the other parts of the South, those are a result of the weather manipulation, because they were actually able to predict how long those fronts would sit in place, and predicting days in advance of how long these things would sit in place and the damage that they would do. It's because they were able to be in control of it. They were actually controlling this thing and controlling the path of it. So this wicked man is thinking that he can be like the Most High. Now, that's what I mean when I'm talking about this man overstepping his boundaries. And the Lord is allowing this to happen so that he can bring upon the wrath that he's going to bring upon this man in the day of the Lord. All right, and I just have a few more verses that I wanted to bring out, and then that'll be the end, because it's not going to always be this way. When the kingdom's established, when Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, comes back and destroys this place and puts the righteous kingdom in place, the righteous are going to rule. All right. You know what? Let me get that. See, because you got the wicked that's in authority right now, and that's why you're seeing such things occur, because the wicked are in control right now. This is Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 2. It says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. And that's what you see going on right now. You see all kind of suffering. You see people mourning. You see all kind of rebellion going on the planet because of the simple fact that the wicked are in control right now. All right, and they're bringing about all these things simply because he thinks he can be like the Most High and he has the right to do these things. All right. And I want to go to Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 10. Because this is the thoughts of Esau. And you know what? I think I want to read this. Let me see. I think I'm going to read this in the NLT. Salaki. Yeah, I'm going to read, this is Isaiah chapter 47 and verse 10 in the NLT. It says, you felt secure in your wickedness. No one sees me, you said, but your wisdom and knowledge have led you astray. And you said, I am the only one, and there is no other. So disaster will overtake you, and you won't be able to charm it away. Calamity will fall upon you, and you won't be able to buy your way out of it. So what's going to happen to Esau, Edom, in all actuality, because as a result of what they're doing, the things that they've done in the day of the Lord, they're going to be punished for their actions and for the things that they've done to this world and unto the Lord's people. All right. Says, continuing in verse 11, says a catastrophe will strike you suddenly, one of which you are not prepared. And that catastrophe is going to be that day when those ICBM nuclear missiles hit this place. All right, because America is going to be taken out and it's going to burn, and it's never going to return. It's not going to be restored. It's going to burn until it burns itself out. Verse 12. Says, now use your magical charms, use the spells you have worked at all these years. Maybe they will do you some good. Maybe they can make someone afraid of you. All the advice you receive has made you tired. Where are all your astrologers, those stargazers who make predictions each month? Let them stand up and save you from what the future holds. But there is no one who can save them, because this is inevitable. It's going to happen. Verse 14 says, but they are like straw burning in the fire. They cannot save themselves from the flame. And when the kingdom comes, after the 1,000 years of servitude that they're going to have in that kingdom. That's exactly what's going to be happen. That's going to happen to them. They're going to be destroyed. They're going to be burned. All right. It says you will get no help from them at all. Their hearth is no place to sit for warmth. Verse 15 says, and all your friends, those whom you have done business since childhood, will go their own ways, turning a deaf ear to your cries. All right. Because this man believes that he'll be able to stay in rulership. All right. He thinks that all the manipulative things that he have done to the Lord's people, the Israelites, the Hebrew Israelites, and even the things that he's done to the other nations. All right. He thinks that he'll be able to remain in rulership. But he doesn't realize that this is only for a short time for him. All right, I had a couple more verses I wanted to bring out. Actually, just one more. I'm going to go to Micah chapter 2. And verse 1. And the heading on here says, woe to oppressors. Verse 1 says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. And see, they're able to do these things right now because they're in rulership and because they have power, because the Lord has given the wicked control over this earth right now. But this is not going to always stand, because the kingdom to come is going to destroy this wickedness. All right. So that's just as it says, woe, meaning it's going to be destruction to these oppressors, those who are in charge. All right. Who are positions of authority. Esau, Edom will be destroyed. All right, but I'm going to leave it there. And I pray that this has been edifying to the listener. And I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh. Shalom.